What if the most famous event in Five Nights at Freddy's history was never truly solved? Not because the answer was hidden, but because the question itself was wrong. And before we dive into the shadows of this mystery, welcome back to the channel, where we break down horror lore, gaming mysteries, and unsettling stories hiding beneath the surface. So if you enjoy deep analysis and chilling theories that linger long after the video ends, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because today we're confronting one of FNAF's oldest wounds, the bite of 87, an incident that has been referenced, hinted at, and debated for nearly a decade, yet still refuses to feel complete. Because, while the games suggest an animatronic bit down on a human's frontal lobe during the restaurant's operating hours, what they never fully clarify is how, why, or even whether we're focusing on the right details. And that uncertainty is exactly where fan theories thrive, with early assumptions pointing toward Foxy due to his aggressive behavior and exposed jaw, only for later games to subtly dismantle that idea by showing Foxy as out of order and physically restricted during the likely time frame, which shifted suspicion toward Mangle, whose erratic ceiling-crawling movement, exposed endoskeleton, and ability to approach adults during the day made it a more convincing candidate. Yet even that explanation leaves behind uncomfortable gaps. Because if Mangle was the culprit, why does the franchise continue to obscure the victim's identity? Why does the injury never appear in later lore consequences? And why does the bite itself feel more symbolic than literal? Leading some fans to propose that the bite of 87 was not simply an accident, but a narrative fracture point, a moment when the animatronics crossed from malfunctioning machines into something undeniably aware, something capable of intent. And that interpretation grows darker when we consider how often FNAF blurs the line between mechanical failure and supernatural interference, suggesting that the bite may represent the first public manifestation of possession rather than its cause. An event where the soul inside the machine briefly overpowered its programming, and yet Scott Cawthon's careful wording never confirms or denies this, instead allowing contradictory clues to coexist, which has led to more unsettling ideas, such as the bite being misstated, misremembered, or even deliberately obscured within the lore, a cover story hiding a more violent or supernatural truth that Fazbear Entertainment buried to protect itself. And when viewed through that lens, the bite of 87 stops being a solved incident and becomes something far more disturbing. A scar in the timeline where official explanations exist only to distract from a truth too unstable to be acknowledged, a truth that still bleeds into every animatronic movement, every malfunctioning camera, and every line of distorted audio that follows. If the bite of 87 is a wound, then the purple guy is the shadow standing behind it, watching silently. And while modern FNAF lore strongly positions William Afton as the definitive identity behind the purple figure, this so-called answer has done little to quiet the community. Because when fans examine the details closely, inconsistencies begin to surface, such as the shifting portrayal of Purple Guy across games, sometimes appearing panicked and fleeing, other times calm, methodical, or even taunting. which raises the unsettling possibility that Purple Guy is not a single individual, but a symbolic role, a recurring presence representing the act of corruption rather than the man himself. And this interpretation gains strength when we consider how FNAF frequently uses color, silhouette, and abstraction instead of literal depiction, meaning Purple Guy may be less a character and more a visual shorthand for murder, secrecy, and guilt. And even if William Afton is the original murderer, fan theories persist that he may not be the only one, suggesting accomplices, imitators, or even successors who inherit the role rather than the identity, which would explain why Purple Guy appears in locations, timelines, and behaviors that feel inconsistent with a single human lifespan. And then there's the deeper psychological layer. The idea that Purple Guy represents fragmentation itself, the splitting of responsibility, memory, and soul, mirroring how the children he murdered were fragmented across animatronics, turning him into a narrative echo rather than a fixed person. And this theory becomes even more haunting when paired with the idea that Afton's consciousness persists in various forms, not as a ghost, but as corrupted intent infecting systems, code, and mechanical behavior long after the body is gone, which aligns disturbingly well with later portrayals of digital consciousness and simulated survival, making Purple Guy less a villain you can defeat and more a concept that evolves, adapts, and refuses to die. And perhaps that is why fans remain unsatisfied with simple answers, because accepting Purple Guy as just William Afton feels like closing a door that the story itself keeps prying open, reminding us that in Offend, evil is rarely contained within one name, one suit, or one ending. If Purple Guy shattered lives, then the animatronics are where those pieces settled. And nowhere is FNAF's unresolved horror more evident than in the concept of fragmented souls, a theory that refuses to fade because it explains too much to ignore, as the games repeatedly suggest that possession is neither clean nor singular, that souls bleed into metal unevenly, leaving behind partial awareness, emotional residue, and behavioral loops rather than complete personalities, which raises disturbing questions about who or what is actually controlling the animatronics at any given moment, especially when we encounter entities like Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie, figures that behave like reflections rather than characters, appearing briefly, silently, and without clear motivation, leading many fans to believe they are manifestations of trauma, agony, or corrupted remnant rather than traditional spirits. And then there is Golden Freddy, perhaps the most infamous unresolved presence in the franchise, existing simultaneously as a suit, a hallucination, a spirit, and a narrative contradiction, appearing and disappearing in ways that defy the game's own rules, which has fueled theories that Golden Freddy represents multiple souls trapped in a single state of unresolved suffering, or worse, a consciousness aware of the player, the timeline, and the looping nature of the games themselves, turning Golden Freddy into a meta-entity rather than an animatronic. And when all of these elements are viewed together, the shadows, the fragments, the glitches, the recurring phrases like "it's me," a chilling realization emerges That FNAF's true horror lies not in murder or jump scares, but in incompleteness, in the idea that nothing in this universe ever fully ends. Souls don't move on cleanly, answers don't resolve neatly, and every attempt to explain the lore only reveals more cracks beneath the surface, which may be exactly why these mysteries continue to haunt the community, because they mirror something deeply human, the fear that some wounds never heal, some questions never receive closure, and some stories were never meant to be solved, only experienced. And as the franchise continues to evolve, leaving breadcrumbs instead of conclusions, one truth becomes impossible to ignore, that the most terrifying part of Five Nights at Freddy's is not what we know, but what remains just out of reach, waiting patiently, in the static, watching us search for answers that may never come.